Now, I wanted, before we get into this one, just to discuss some of the challenges around trades and builders and carpenters specifically, because not a lot of people know these ones. And I think it sets up the context of what we're going to cover. It's also very different. And this person has specifically asked this question because they heard the web design episode and their idea of getting margins similar to what can be done in digital agencies or that niche, very different. So can we kick off there?
Definitely. Take us on a journey, Charlie.
Okay, so again, for those that don't know, although I've said it enough on this podcast, and another opportunity to bring it up is that I actually did a plumbing apprenticeship. I was
Say
a plumber.
what?
Right, 7 years.
Wait.
I was in there.
Get out.
Yeah, and Dad, builder is a carpenter. People would have heard that as well. Like
Never
I've
heard it.
seen and been around this industry a lot, and there's some things I would reference. So number one is that for a lot of carpenters and concreters and any of the trades that are heavy on labor, you don't see a lot of older people doing it.
Seems to be a bit tough on the body.
Yeah, hugely. So you got to think of this one like being an athlete, right? Your career might only last to a certain point, and then you really have to think differently about it. Where if you are in digital agencies, the reality is if you can do it in your 20s, you can do it in your 60s and be fine. So you got to put different factors into this one.
Completely.
The second thing that makes the trade, particularly industries, the margins are not the same as what can be done in other things. And we'll discuss ways to work around this. But the reality is in the types of these businesses, I think it would be an absolute rarity, not impossible, but a rarity to find a carpenter that does an over 50% margin unless it's just him working on the tools and he's excluding his own labor cost.
Completely. Good.
Third
good way
thing
to
that makes
manipulate
this
margins.
one, go for it, Grant.
Good way to manipulate margins. just don't count your own time.
I know I'm talking about the downsides, but this is,
totally.
we'll get into the pros. I think most trades don't recognize their advantages. They don't use them properly. And in hindsight, I recognize that I didn't see them, but we'll get to that. The third thing that makes the building industry really interesting in Australia is it's quite common to be paid on 90-day terms.
Mm-hmm.
So the cash flow cycle is really atrocious. And to let people know how this actually happened, quick side story. Way back, I think it was actually in the 50s, Australia needed to grow. People had come back from the wars and they needed to find a way to fund the growth of Australia and build the country. So it was actually brought in as a policy to do 90-day terms so that everyone could get to work. But they just never reversed the decision. And
How
90
convenient.
days.
How convenient.
Yeah. And there's been some very big builders out there and developers that have made a lot of money off this. So to give you an idea, and I won't name the company that did this, but it's quite famous that one of the builders and developers in Melbourne used to make huge amounts of money off basically gambling with people's money before they had to pay it to trades. So they get hired to do a build, they've got this money, and then they didn't have to pay their trades for 90 days.
So
they would be making money on that money.
It doesn't sound risky at all, Charlie.
Oh, may have not gone as they planned. But just a little side note there on just some things that make this particularly challenging. And I'm sure many people have seen in the news cycle how many builders particularly have gone bust in recent times with the cost of materials going up, fixed price contracts, the challenges of finding quality labor and qualified trades to work on things.
Cost of labor.
Yeah. This has a very different set of challenges. If you're in, let's say, Victoria and you're a builder, you're limited by the labor you can get to actually come to your site, where us in the digital world, where we can hire from anywhere in the world, different pros and cons here.
I'm so excited to see what you're putting down.
Oh, well, do you want to go first or you want me to go first? Then?
I do have one. I'm going to get you to go first, but I do have one question for you, just because I think it's going to be a key differentiator. So going from a carpenter to a builder, which I assume that's a licensed builder, what's the difference between a carpenter and a licensed builder?
Yeah, that's actually a really good
that's
question.
not for me, by the way. That's for listeners.
It's assumed knowledge, right? I know, but the listeners may not know. Right, so the way it works in Australia, just to get an idea, is that there are trades, which is like your plumbers, your carpenters, your plasterers, sparkies, all of that. And when it comes to there's some things they can do on their own. Like if you need a light switch changed in your house, you can just ring an electrician and they'll come and change it. If you want a wall plastered, they can come and just, replaster a wall. But when you start to do things like building a new home, for example, or doing an extensive renovation, you would need a builder. And the power of this builder is the ability to come in and sign and say that, hey, you can live in this. Yep. Like this is, habitable. So that is the real value, to be able to sign off works for people to be able to live in. And then the next jump up from that is the developer. Now, the developer is, well, it could be an individual at times because we see that as well. But this is where you see like the Hickories, the Beacons, Gurners. Like these are big developers who hire builders to do their projects.
Interesting. Okay. And is there an oversupply of builders with licenses, or is this a equilibrium, or is there an undersupply? I'm just more curious as to like, is that alone its own benefit?
Yeah, so the value of a building license is high. It's very high, and I'll explain why. There used to be, I believe this was in the 90s, but it used to be substantially easier to get your license. And then they realized there was a lot of cowboys out there doing dodgy work. So they've actually made it more and more restrictive and harder to get your license. And the process of getting a license, I think it takes years now. It's not something that can be done over that time. And there's all these things like you have to show proof that you're worthy of having a license. So, for example, if I said I want to go get a building license, they're going to say, "What are you going to use it for?" And my means might not be enough. Even if I've done the course, they're going to say, "Well, you just want it to build, a couple of houses a year." Versus in the example of our listener question here, this is someone who's got carpentry experience, done builds, where he's much more suitable to have that.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into creating wealth inside and outside your business, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.